Hello and welcome to Big Bad Con Online. This panel is called Stronger Together, Peer Collaboration in TTRPGs, a panel focused around giving you all some information and insight about how to reach out to your fellow collaborators and assemble your dream team, a bit about project management, and most importantly, how to bring your project across the finish line. Especially if you are someone that would love to create for the big companies someday, publishing anything is so important for one's portfolio. And even more, showing that you can work on a team demonstrates collaborative skills that a team leader might be looking for. Over the next 50 minutes, we hope to encourage you all to look around you for potential collaborators because your peers are here. My name is Nala RJ. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm an art director and illustrator working full-time in the TTRPG space. I also do voice acting, sensitivity consulting, and I am a TTRPG actual play stream performer. And I'm going to be your moderator today. Before my incredible panelists introduce themselves, I have a really few quick announcements. The Big Bad Con online fundraiser has met its goal. Yay! Thank you all so much for donating. That being said, the con is still raising money, which will go towards funding scholarships for the in-person con that happens this year. It will be at the end of October. So if you have some disposable income and would like to support bringing marginalized folks to the con, great place to do so. Lastly, there's an after panel discussion, which will in Q&A that will happen in the Discord. So if you'd like to continue the conversation post this panel, if you don't get to your questions because we may not have time for Q&A, head on over to the Big Bad Online Discord. Now for my lovely panelists, please tell the audience who you are, what you do, and why do you feel so passionate about choosing to work on collaborative projects? And we'll start with Dominique.
Cool. Hi, I'm Dominique. I use they, them pronouns. I'm at Dom S. Dickey pretty much everywhere online. I'm the creative director of Sly Robot Games. We're a small press that's put out games such as Tomorrow in Revelation 3 and Plant Girl Game, and we're working on the upcoming The Prince of Nothing Good. I'm also a designer and editor at Monty Cook Games in like a full-time capacity. I came to game design by way of theater, which is inherently collaborative. There are a lot of moving parts and a lot of things that one person cannot do by themselves. And most of my approach to assembling a team and to managing a project are informed by my background as a stage manager.
Hell yeah. Dylan?
Hello, I'm Dylan, or Super Dylan. My pronouns are she, he, or you can mirror your own at me. And I am a freelance game designer, independent game designer, and a entertainer in the actual play space as well. And I am passionate about this because I cannot imagine growing or learning how to do what we do without my peers and colleagues.
All right. Hi, my name is Lila. I use she, her pronouns. I am a project lead and game designer. Right now, the two things I am project leading are the Stormlight Archive TTRPG, which is based off of Brandon Sanderson's work, and a indie project that is completely designed by me called Jukebox, the karaoke TTRPG. And the reason, well, there's a lot of reasons that I'm excited about collaboration, but one of the things I want to say is I was listening to a podcast recently who had like a psychologist on about like happiness at work. And the things that make people the most happy at work, I like noted it down, are having a friend at work. That's actually like one of the big things that like makes people really happy. Like, you know, how much money you get, your manager being good, that all matters. But having friends, having a sense of purpose and having feelings of belonging are all like really important just for us to be happy at our workplaces. And I think, at least for me and a lot of folks, that requires having other people there. So collaboration, yay.
Hell yeah. Last but not least, Taylor?
Hi, my name is Taylor Navarro. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a creative lead and project manager. You might recognize me as a producer from Tales to Sina Una, the executive chef from Chef's de Partie, or as a creative lead on Not Yet, which just finished kickstarting recently. The reason that I'm very passionate to be here specifically is because I'm a strong believer that games are made to be shared, yes, even solo ones. And if you're going to make something that's a shared experience, you have to share the experience of making it.
Well said. So today's panel is going to be divided up into like three main sections, classic storytelling, beginning, middle, end. So we'll start at the beginning. Team building. This is the stage where you've decided, I want to make a thing, number one, but number two, I want to work on this with other people. because I don't want to or I cannot do this alone. And I think that step is, first of all, a really important one to take. I think a lot of people might think, oh, like, I can do everything myself. And then you never put out anything because you put too much stress on yourself. So today we're here to talk about how to actually bring in other people to work with you, especially if you don't really have that many connections in the space. That's what we're really going to be focusing on today. So, question for you all, you can take it in any order you'd like. What are the best practices for assembling a team? Stuff like, who should you work with? And what have you found in your own experiences is the best process for assembling a team?
I'll go ahead and jump in.
Hell yeah.
All right. Looking over here at my notes. So I think if you're new, one of the first things that you should really be thinking about, or one of the things that's interesting in the TTRPG space, is that there's a lot of folks who are, it has a split, well, not a split, it has a continuum between like hobbyist game designers and people who are trying to do it professionally. And I think like how you want to approach that and where you're sort of positioning your project is a important thing to think about off the bat. Like, are you working with a group of friends and you're maybe not really focused on making money and like, you know, on sort of a hobbyist side of the spectrum, or are you trying to, you know, do something that's like very professional? And that informs things like whether you're going to pay people word rates and, you know, to with the standards of sort of the industry, or be doing like a royalty split or something like that. So anyways, I think that's just like a big thing that like folks should be thinking of off the bat. And that'll also kind of inform your application process a little bit, I think, or the way that you reach out to people and find folks. So I have done two different things. I've done a full-fledged like actual application process where I had people apply. I was paying people a certain amount. I think that is more reasonable and easy to do if you have either you are paying people or you are known in the space or some combination of that. When folks are new, you are probably going to be reaching out to people or doing a sort of like more organic networking kind of thing. And I think for that, at least when I started, the things that were really big for me were, I think Discords are a place that people are meeting each other. The Rising Tide, the storyteller Discord are, you know, both good ones to look at. And specifically, I found my initial collaborators through taking a course on the Storytelling Collective, and then actually looking at my classmates and the work that they published through that course, and specifically reaching out to the ones that I was interested in working with, one of whom is Taylor, and we are like huge collaborators right now. So that is my tips.
Nice. I also just want to add too that when you are trying to figure out who to work with on certain things or about certain things, and just in general, when you are even just trying to learn from things in the space, I think that in any art form, trying to collaborate with people without being like familiar or knowledgeable on the work that those people have done is going to lead you down a bad path. So familiarize yourself with the work that your friends are actually doing. Read their games, watch their performances, and learn what it is that they do really well. So that when you're asking people to do things with you, you're doing so mindfully, and you're not asking someone to come and write a high fantasy game with you who has never done anything high fantasy and does not have a strong sense for it. Asking somebody to come and do logo design when they do character illustration and like things like that. Know who you're asking and know what your friends are good at, so that you can ask them to be a part of things in a really meaningful way that elevates the work that you're doing.
I would also add that if you're approaching someone who you don't have as much of a like rapport with, or you haven't worked with previously, then having that familiarity with their work is not only good practice, but it also can go a long way in making that initial ask. I think it can be really impactful to say, I've seen your work on XYZ, and I'm doing something that is kind of in a similar vein, and I think that it would be beneficial to have you on this project. I think that if you're approaching someone as an unknown quantity, it is always going to help to tell them why you specifically think that they would be a good fit for what you're doing.
I have a follow-up question for you, actually, and anyone else can take it after. But how important do you think it is to have like a formal pitch deck? I'm assuming we are recommending people reach out via email. because that's important, instead of like sliding into the DMs. But is how important is a formal pitch deck or just a document with information? What do you recommend?
I feel like it really depends on how developed the project is at the point that you're reaching out to the person. Like I think that if the person that you're reaching out to is someone who would be doing more of the visuals or someone who would be doing like module design, and those are things that would then be part of your kind of like snowballing ongoing pitch to whoever else you want on the team, then you might not have the pitch deck when you reach out to that person because you would need something from them to like produce it. But I also I think how I reach out to people really depends on where they're most available. If someone doesn't have a publicly available email or like a contact form, I will definitely use DMs. And I will try to just offer like a short textual pitch of the project, links to some of my past work or things that I have done that might be like kind of in the same vein, and then offer to either like send an email with more information or hop on a call with more information, depending on what is like most feasible to them. So like, I don't think that you really have to have it all figured out as long as you can cohesively and concisely get across like the bones of what you're trying to do and why you want this person to do it.
Should I?
Lila? Yes.
I'll go through it. Taylor and I probably have like somewhat similar things to say. So I jotted down. This is either what you need to include in your reach out or have an answer for, or know what you're gonna how you're gonna get an answer for it. So if you are leading a project or you're responsible for this, you should have thought about how pay is going to work. We might talk a little bit more about different options for how you can pay people, but being upfront about that is important. And you should make it very clear whether you're asking for a royalty split, like volunteer work, or some other thing, or if you have like a pay per word rate. The schedule is important because that is definitely something that could be like a sort of make or break for the person. Like they just might not have time for you, and you might as well get that out of the way and know that. And then stuff that other folks have been saying. So you should have a quick elevator pitch about what you're trying to make. You should make it clear what their responsibilities are, like what you're going to want them to do on the project. So if you have something as specific enough as like it's going to be 1,000 words, or we want you to write one chapter, or you're going to be editing, XYZ. And then finishing off with next steps for how to reach out to you and how to get back and sort of negotiate things. Sorry, I have trains going by, but the thing that Dominique and a couple other folks have already said, which is also very important, is in addition to all of this like administrative, like just clarity about what is actually required for the project, you are also trying to make the case of why you are excited about them, and then also why they should be excited about you. Because again, you're really focusing on the message that you're giving to them. So it is actually equally as important to like prove why you are going to be an enjoyable person to work with, what skills that you bring to it, and then also specifically why you picked them.
Just to kind of bullet point that. So essentially, when you're reaching out, it doesn't matter if it's a DM or an email. It should definitely be a little bit about who you are, a little bit about why you want them, an elevator pitch. And when I say an elevator pitch, I do want new people to understand that very vague stuff of like, oh, it's going to be like a high fantasy setting is not the elevator pitch that you think it is. You need to really go into detail. But on the flip side, because I've had emails like this, not too much detail where they're having to read like a whole A4 page worth of stuff to try and figure out what your project is. One paragraph, about 200 words max, is really what you want for an elevator pitch. You want the role specifics, including word count and pay, like Lila said, whatever financial compensation plan that you have for that. You want a projected timeline, because a lot of people, once they kind of start getting in the industry, their time gets booked up quick. A freelancer can only feasibly do about 3 projects at any given time. And for some people who work part-time, like me, that's even less. So you really need to let them know when you need them to be available. And also any additional requirements. So, for example, I let people know for not yet, when I was reaching out to my stretch goal writers, I was like, hey, as part of this, I would like you to make at least one social media post boosting the project before your stretch goal is hit. So that way we can pull in your audience and hopefully get them to help fund the goal. So all of that information needs to be in the very first message, especially if you're reaching a little bit above your peerage, which I do encourage you to do as well. People will not want to waste time going back and forth and may cut you off very quick if they don't think that you have all of the answers. And unfortunately, it's not always the best, but people be busy, yo. And you've really got to make sure that you seem like you know what you're doing up front, even if you're making it up as you go along, which all of us have done at some point.
I think also what Taylor's speaking to is like you need to be ready to pitch. If you're at the idea stage, that's great. But I think until you actually can write it down, have that elevator pitch, I would say continue developing the idea until you are ready to pitch. And I think the last question, or maybe second to last question in this section, I want to combine for my panelists questions A and B. Sort of like, how do you find people to work with? How do you assess who would be a good fit? We've talked very briefly about reaching out to people either above your peerage or those around you. How do you assess someone, especially if a majority of the people you're gathering have are all about on the same level, i.e., don't really have anything published in the space. This is a majority of everyone's first projects. How do you find people besides just like, oh, let me ask my friends?
I have something about just the finding aspect of that, because I feel like it's really easy to, you find the couple of people that you're working with, and then you get into your comfort zone, which there's nothing really wrong with that, but there are new people breaking ground every day, and if you miss out on them, one, you're missing out on people to collaborate with, and two, you're also kind of missing out on like things to learn about how things are changing in the work that you're doing. And then, so I think of it the same way as I think about social media. If you are posting on social media and you are never engaging with other people, you don't succeed. Your posts don't go anywhere. You don't grow. You don't reach an audience. And I think it's the same with consuming, playing games, writing for games, and actual play as well. If you are not watching other actual plays, if you're not playing and reading other games, you're going to kind of get left behind and lost as you are putting stuff out, but not learning about who's making things. So the answer is just play more games, read them, check that content label and who's making what and who drew for this and who designed what. And seek those people out, and especially if you liked what they did, and keep them, like, create your circle from there.
Incredible advice.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I also just want to be the voice, and I think Dylan was also, saying this of, like, working with your peers is good. Working with folks who are maybe like less known is good. And I think it takes a little bit more effort, but also, everybody who has a huge Twitter following is probably getting tons of, asks to be able to do things. And there are a bunch of talented people out there whose, their skills are with editing or with writing, and it might not be with like curating a Twitter presence, for example. And that doesn't mean that they're not going to be like a great fit for your project. So the question is really, how do you find these folks? I will say again, if you are new, I think the Storytelling Collective is a great place, because you will be in a course with other folks who are trying to do, what you are doing, and are investing some like time and money in writing stuff for the first time if you're new. And then I will have big thoughts about this in the future, I think, but I ran an application process for Jukebox that we got over 75 applications, and I'm sure we could have had more because it filled up in like 3 days or something with people that were applying. But with where that project was and the fact that like some people knew about it, I really appreciated the project the aspect of like running through an application process and being able to see writing samples and pitches from people that I did not know. And I have people in the Jukebox team that I did not know before, and selected their pitches, and it was 100% worth the extra work of kind of reading through people's stuff and getting to know about folks. So Definitely would recommend. I blog about stuff over on Jar of Eyes, Games Gazette, and have tutorials about things. So I'll probably be posting something about how I ran that application process.
Amazing.
I will speak a little bit to assessment, and I'm going to say something that nobody likes to hear, first and foremost. People talk in the industry. So when you, even if it's your very, very first project, you want to be acting in a certain way as like a project manager, but also somebody who's been brought onto the project. You want to write a specification, whatever that specification is. You want to hand in your work on time, and you want to communicate throughout that whole process and show that you're engaged. Now, you don't have to give people like updates on every little thing, and you shouldn't be kind of like disregarding people when they don't like communicate like every tiny thing, but there does need to be some back and forth there. um, and so one thing that I have done to kind of figure out who I enjoy working with, I'm really going to out myself now, is I've been running a series of like small projects. Some of them are just one page, and I have been inviting people who I haven't necessarily worked with in a closed capacity before. So the assignments for Chef's de Partie were 100 words. And then I worked with Nala, who I hadn't worked with before, and I worked with an editor who I wasn't very familiar with. And that was basically me going, okay, this is small. This is something I'm running by myself. How do we all work together? Like who do I think I have a good work fit with? And then like when I go on to do bigger projects, those are the people that I'm going to be bringing with me onto those projects because they've proven that they can be trusted. So I would say whatever your first project is going to be, make it small. Like my first project I ever did with Lila that made me decide she's going to be my best friend forever and ever, was an encounters thing. So we all wrote a single encounter, and based on that, I knew kind of who I would be happy to work with again, who I really wanted to work with again, and some people that I was like, okay. And I think that's really important, is like if you want to be a creative lead or a project manager, or you just want to like make your own things and be the one who's in charge, doing like small tester projects before going into something big, because when you go into something big, you might find that sometimes people don't live up to this standard, and that's okay. But if you didn't know them at all in the first place and then they're letting you down, that's stress, that's delayed deadlines, and that's more money out your pocket, mate. Like, yeah.
Absolutely. I think we're transitioning perfectly into the middle section of this, which is going to be about more of the project management side. But really quick, we do have an audience question. This can be really, really quick. If you're waiting for a response from someone you've reached out to, how long do you wait before a follow-up? If anyone has opinions, say it. For me personally, I'd wait a week before getting back to them. And this is why you start reaching out early and pushing out your timelines so that you have the time for people to get back to you, talk about contracts, which we'll get to, and all of that stuff. But what do y'all think?
I would say like a week to 2 weeks. I think, especially people who are dealing with a lot of freelance work, email admin can get very overwhelming. And I try to kind of give people the grace that I would want as I'm drowning under my own mountain of emails. So 2 weeks if you have the time, a week if you don't, but definitely at least a week.
So just very quickly on this, when you reach out to them, give them a date by which you would like them to get back to you. So set a clear expectation around that. As Taylor was saying, like being able to follow directions and kind of like, catch stuff or whatever is like one of the things that is helpful for somebody working for you. And, speaking a little bit more to like being kind about it, setting that date a week or two out, and you could even say something like, hey, we don't have to get into all the specifics, but if you were just like off the bat excited about this, like send me something quick by this date. But I think setting timeline expectations is helpful.
Amazing.
I will also
Go
say
ahead.
that like once you are committed to working with someone, and I guess this does pivot into like our project management section, but once you've committed to working with someone, I think one of the first things to establish off the bat is like an expected cadence of communications. I would say like I definitely see more wiggle room in the initial ask, but once someone is on board, I am more proactive about following up with emails on like a shorter timeline. But I think like making that clear early on.
Hell yeah. All right, so we're going to move to our middle section. This is assuming you have your team, people have signed contracts. This panel, we're not necessarily going to dive into specifics about contracts, whether or not you should have them, that sort of thing. I mean, we can talk very briefly about that. But we're mainly talking about how to guide the team through the thing, assuming that you, the person listening to this, is the person who is in charge of the team at this point. So I want to start off with like what kind of expectations should be set at the start of the project. This can be like a contract. I know that Taylor, when you and I worked together, you gave us basically a bullet pointed list of here's your responsibilities, this is the time you need to get done by. It wasn't necessarily a contract as one would think of a contract, but it very clearly outlined the expectations. So how do you do that? And is there anything better, or sorry, is there anything that's better to leave undefined?
Okay, so everything that we just talked about in like that first part, so like how like basically how you're going to assess someone, like writing to spec, on time, communicative, like everything from the elevator pitch, like and that initial reach out. You want to formalize that and write that all down, and then get them to read through it thoroughly and agree to it. So what we did for Chefs de Partie, Tios Alba has a code of conduct, which I went over, adjusted it as I needed. So it's the expectations for if we have disputes on the project, what do we do? Who do you talk to? And then it also, the bits that I added was, okay, this is your role. This is what I expect from you. And I think it's really important to make that clear, but also something that Lila pointed out to me actually is that you need to be able to refer back to it later. So I used the Google form, and then I also had like a Google Doc that people could look at with all of it copy and pasted, just so that way it is quick to reference. Yeah, so basically everything that you're looking for, everything we've already discussed, formalize it and get people to agree to it, especially because if they then start failing in the things that you're assessing them on, you can pull out the agreement and say, well, you said that you would do this, so and you also have an established like thing that you're going to do, like if you have to pull them from the project, if you have to give them a warning, that kind of thing. I 100% for new people do not use a work for hire contract. A code of conduct is going to cover everything, and unless you're paying people a per word rate, which you probably aren't going to be doing, but again, we're not going too deep into finances. I would say that a code of conduct and outlining roles is sufficient here.
I agree. Dom?
I think that if you're in a position where people might be like depending on the income from your project in any capacity, it's pretty useful early on to specify if you have like a kill fee structure, like if someone becomes untenable to work with, or if you ultimately don't use their contribution to the project, is there a stipulation that you would like pay them 50% to walk, basically? It can get you out of dicey situations if you're working with someone that doesn't quite go the way you expected it to, even if it's someone that you have vetted previously. Just because you like never really know how things are going to go once the rubber meets the road, as it were. I also think that setting expectations just in terms of scope of work, like Taylor said, about what people's responsibilities are. And I also recommend that I try to kind of meet people where they're at in terms of like work style and check-in structure. So asking like, if this is your deadline, when do you anticipate that you would like have something to turn over? Or like I've been on some projects that have a kind of like a rough draft deadline and a final draft deadline, and that doesn't really work the best for me. So that's not something that I would impose on someone else. I think also like being open to if someone tends to write in bursts and might get it done like in the week before it's due, but you're kind of hounding them for progress throughout the entire timeline, and that puts them under pressure when they might not have anything to show you yet, especially if they're working on multiple projects. So in terms of like cadence of communications and in terms of checking in and style of work, I recommend kind of asking people what they would prefer and meeting them where they're at with that.
That's really great advice.
Thank you.
Two quick things. So when we say contract, and especially as you're starting out, I don't think you need to immediately think of like a PDF signed document for things, but it still can be helpful to have something that is essentially a contract. And I'm not a lawyer, but at least I've been told that like it is legally helpful to have what I'm about to say. So one thing I've been told, like you could take it and potentially have it used in like a court or something, is if you just have a cleanly written email with all of the stuff that everybody's been talking about, that both people say like, yep, that's what I expect will happen, that works. So it doesn't have to be this super fancy thing. And then something I think that I know that both Taylor and I have done has been like Google Forms that just are like, I agree to this promotional responsibility of one tweet. I agree to this like writing responsibility of this. I agree to the code of conduct. The other thing that I think is helpful is when you're going through communication norms, when you're going through the schedule, have a paragraph or have some thoughts about what to do if the collaborators having issues. Basically, you want to give them you want to be approachable, and you want to seem like somebody who's on their, you want to be somebody who is on their side and somebody that they can actually talk to if they're having some sort of like life crisis or a scheduling crisis or something. Like, you as the project lead want to know about that. So I think it is helpful to be like, every single time you reach out, and also the formalized documentation, like, if I know I'm going to be late, this is what you should do, sort of thing. And sorry, one more thing. I found it really helpful to meet people on video calls if they also enjoy doing that. To open up that conversation a little bit with asking about what their goals are in the TTRPG space, and talking to some of the things that like Dominique was saying about like what their work style is, and having that be more of like a two-way conversation about like, what do you want to get out of this? What are your goals? What's your work style? And then, collaboratively coming into agreement that like reflects on their responsibilities about what they're going to be doing on your project.
Amazing. Cool. As we sort of are talking about collaborative teamwork and whatnot, I think it's very rare nowadays that you are working on a team that can meet in person or with people that only live around you. With the power of the internet, we meet online. And I think that has brought a lot of struggles with completely remote teams. So what are the challenges of working freelance completely remotely? And more importantly, how have you successfully or not successfully seen the challenge of asynchronous work? How do you overcome that?
I can go if nobody else.
Go ahead.
So on Tales of Sina Una, I'm actually managing people globally. So we have somebody in Australia, half the team are in the Philippines, and then the other half are in America. Now, I'm actually very lucky based in the UK that I am smack bang in the middle. So I get to cover all of the time zones, but not everyone is that fortunate. I think the biggest challenge, and this is going to be a little bit sad, is isolation. Working remotely, like not being around people, like you get your assignment, you go away, you do your section, and you hand it to somebody who puts all the building blocks together. So it wasn't super successful, but one of the things I did is I did like a doodle poll, and I tried to arrange like co-working sessions across different time zones, so that way people could hop into calls and just kind of, even if they weren't talking, just kind of be present and around each other. Something that I'm doing with Not Yet is I think I've been calling my team to actually discuss things at a time that they're available, just so that way, because again, for Not Yet, 3 out of the 4 core team members are in India. So calling them and just like being like, okay, instead of sending you an email about this, we're just going to talk about it. And then we can back and forth that way. And it helps. I personally think it helps with the loneliness and isolation, and other people can kind of decide for themselves whether they think it helps. But for me, that is like the biggest challenge, because anything can be an email if you want it to. It's like making time to be people and be creative together that I think is the biggest challenge.
I also want to flag for people, Taylor mentioned doodle polls. That's the same thing as like a when to meet or a let us meet. It's basically a scheduling tool. If we're going to give recommendations for specific software or project management tools that you found useful, highly recommend that. That will make sure that you can find a time that everybody's schedule lines up, especially if you want to have like a kickoff meeting or something like that. Or if you want to organize like essentially office hours as like a project lead to be like, oh, I'll be working at this time. Anyone can come drop in, ask questions, or just co-work with me in silence. Are there any other tools very quickly that you all would recommend? Me personally, I've worked on teams that use Trello. Love that tool. If that works for you, great. I've worked on teams that use Miro, Miro boards. Also very useful. And I think just nothing beats like a collaborative Google Doc brainstorm. And then lastly, for the for me for scheduling mishaps, like what you can do, get a group of collaborators together and do a game jam. Next week I'm doing one. We're gonna make something together over the course of I think like 2 hours, and I'm very excited for it. And that's something that we organized, we scheduled out, we all blocked off the time, and we have a concept, and we're just gonna make a thing. And hopefully we're gonna walk out of this game jam with a thing that we can put out there, and that's super fun, and I recommend that.
Hell yeah.
But any last tool recommendations?
Calendly. I think I had another one similar thing recommended to me, but basically it is something that will let people see a anonymized version of your calendar and schedule meetings like during times that you are free. And the free tier is it lets you have one meeting type, so people can schedule 30-minute meetings with me basically if I share my Calendly with them.
Amazing. Anyone else? Last minute tool recs. All right, moving on. I think we touched on this briefly, but does anyone have anything else? Like, what can you do to help a collaborator who's struggling to complete their work? I have something really quick to say, and then Taylor can go. As an art director, I always put like at least a month of buffer, because you give them a deadline, but the real deadline is sometime after that, because life happens, shit happens.
Yeah.
And people on your team, you put the people first, always.
Yeah.
Being someone who's good to work with, being pleasant to work with, is so important in this industry. I was on a panel last night at midnight Eastern time where we talked about this. And so you should go watch that. But being someone that people like working for is really important, because then you build a rapport and people will want to work with you again. You build that reputation, people will want to work on your projects. And so for me as an art director, I always budget that time. So if an artist is like, hey, I'm really struggling, I haven't been able to get any work done, I can be like, that's okay, I can give you an extension. As a project lead, budget in time for extensions, and budget as much time as you possibly can for extensions, because if you get it in early, that's great. So just have that buffer time is my advice.
Yes.
You go,
sorry,
Taylor.
you go. I've
Taylor,
spoken a lot. You guys.
I just want to just add to what Nala said. So it's just really quickly is that I've been on the side, because I don't do a lot of project leading. I am mostly a freelancer myself. So I have been the person who has hit the struggle and has been late on something and has, fell behind and struggled with my work. And I will, there is a team that I worked for where when discussing that, the empathy that was shown to me and the support that was shown to me inspired me to put out probably my best work like ever, because when I was met with like so much understanding, I wanted to work so much harder to get them what they needed and to make it incredible. And I will recommend that team a million times over and over and over again. So just from that side, a little empathy will really, really, really go a long way.
Absolutely. I'm going to move us along to the final section. Sorry, yes, Lila, one thing.
All right, I know I keep coming in here. I have like a slightly different perspective. I 100% agree with empathy and everything. I think one thing as a project lead that you should keep in mind is, so you're a person on the team too. And it is, so there are folks who, like, sometimes there's a situation where a collaborator is just not going to be able to get, something done. And I think that it can be a little bit hard because you do want to be liked and like, you do want to, provide a lot of empathy. So I have a whole list of stuff before about just being like very clear about expectations. And then when somebody is struggling, like meeting with them and trying to plan together, what would work to get something out the door. But you shouldn't take stuff off the table where if somebody like just cannot get things done on time, to have planning for how to take stuff off their plate, because sometimes like one of the biggest kindnesses is to be able to like have somebody that can take the load off if they're just not going to be able to do it, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I think that is like one of the hardest things to do as a lead, is to have like some of those conversations. But it's not like that never happens. And so that is a thing I just want to bring up. So definitely lead with empathy. The person is more important than the project, but sometimes the person being more important than the project is realizing that somebody has bit off more than they can chew, and supporting them in how to like transition them off of it.
I have like one very minor thing about building buffer time into your timelines, which is build buffer time in for yourself as well as for your contractors, because when you make a project timeline, that is for like blue sky conditions, and you are not going to meet your timeline, and you could be the delay just as well as anyone else could be. And if you are the delay, communicate that to the people you're working with.
Absolutely. I think burnout is something that a lot of us face as project leads, and something that creeps up on you. And it's hard to see it coming, especially if you're go, go, go all the time. I could do a whole panel about burnout in this space. So just take care of yourselves, listen to yourselves. If you need to take a day, take the day. You and the people you work with are way more important. So yes, now I'd love to transition in the little time we have left to the finish line. You made the project. You did it. Yay. So now you need to put it online. That is the most important thing. Like I said, when you are applying to larger companies, larger jobs, full-time jobs, they're going to want to see that you've made something. That is the number one advice I've heard from countless people who work at companies like Paizo, WotC, etc. That's Wizard of the Coast acronym. Anyway, you need to have a portfolio online. This goes for writing, art, whatever. You need to get the thing in the hands of people who are not on your team. This is also the time where you can take feedback. You can do revisions. This is when you play test. These are all things, again, that could be a completely separate panel. And I just want to focus really quickly, again, in the last few minutes we have, a speed round really quick for y'all. What are the best platforms for publishing? I'm going to start this off by just saying itch. Great place. You can self-publish on there. TTRPG, you can self-publish there, but definitely take a look at the revenue splits. That's something to keep an eye out for. But any other recommendations from y'all besides itch.io and DriveThruRPG?
Relevant to this conversation, itch, at least unless something changed in the last like half a year, does not do revenue splitting automatically, which sometimes makes it a lot easier to be publishing on DM's Guild or DriveThru. Beyond that, itch is like a lovely platform, but it means that you'll have to like be sending out, if you're doing a royalty split, like checks to I don't even know. This is, so I would not necessarily recommend this for like a first-time creator, but as is witnessed by the last 3 months, Taylor and I have found a lot of success on Kickstarter. Specifically, like Jukebox made 16K. That is so much more than the sort of like pittance that I've made in Itch and DriveThru. It definitely took a lot of work. Dylan jumped in and did like a jukebox straight, like people on this call helped out with that, Nala too. So collaboration. It wasn't just like put up on Kickstarter and it does better, but that is a different beast. But it starts the money starts working out a little bit better, that you could actually pay people word rates and stuff if you plan on Kickstarters and things well. So I just want to bring that up. I would not do that for your first everything that you publish, but definitely something to start thinking about once you know how to like make PDFs and get them out to people.
I have seen people get around the revenue splitting issue on itch by like setting up the project as a bundle, basically. But I would say itch and be willing to look into those workarounds if you're trying to set up royalties for multiple people working on a project.
Amazing. Anyone have any super quick tips for like marketing? How does a team split the load marketing? again, I have really quick advice. I would have someone on the team make like graphics to promote your stuff, and then you set up again at the very beginning the expectation that people will at least like retweet the graphic. I've been on teams where it's been laid out that like part of the payment is that they're paying for us to make 2 posts about the project on our own platforms. So like laying out those expectations before, but I definitely think marketing is really hard, especially if you don't have anything or anyone specifically who's really good at it. But what have y'all found that is successful?
I have something really quick because Not Yet just funded on Kickstarter, and I've been saying this to literally every single person that I've spoken to. I could not have done it without my peers, but that means the peers that are not on the project, the people in the community who I have worked with, who I've interacted with, who I've become friends with, who uplifted the game, retweeted it without being asked. But that also means you have to pay it back. Like, you should be retweeting your friends' stuff anyway because you want them to get noticed, you want them to get an audience, you want them to get money.
We all eat together.
We all eat together, 100%. So for marketing, I found that really worked for me is because then I reached their audiences, and I had people who ran podcasts who were like, yeah, of course I'll interview you this Thursday and you've asked on Monday morning. Like, that kind of thing, just being kind of willing to ask and share the spotlight, and reach out to your peers who aren't on the project, really did wonders for me. But it just shows the importance of collaboration both in and out of your work.
All right. We are almost at time. So just a reminder, we can continue the discussion in the Discord. Any additional questions, I'm sure you can ping us on Twitter, whatever, we can try to get to it. But yeah, I would love us to all go around one last time, tell us where people can find you on the internet, and plug one thing. And we will go in the same order from before, and I will go last, starting with Dom.
Okay. You can find me on most social media at Dom S. Dickey, also at DominiqueDickey.com. And the Sly Robot Games, we're currently playtesting a game called The Prince of Nothing Good. You can find more information about that on Twitter, and also reach out to me or my business partner, CJ, who's at Near Futures on Twitter, if you would like to be part of the playtest.
It's a good game, y'all. Do it. Dylan.
Hi, I'm Dylan, Super Dylan everywhere on the internet. And you can find me if you want to see some of the things that I've made. My itch is Super Dylan, where you can see I've made a 2-player game that is about an author and the protagonist of the story arguing and fighting for agency over the story's ending. And you can hear me on the Atom List or the One Shot podcast, where I play a different game every single month. That's it.
And I am Lila, and you can find me. So I guess everything links out from jarofeyes.com. Relevant to this conversation, but that I didn't plug much up front. I write a newsletter, which is essentially free tutorials about project managing specifically for the TTRPG space. I try to make templates and things that people can use and like reflect on stuff going on in my own projects. And I will go ahead and plug the Jukebox pre-order if you like karaoke, TTRPGs, musicals. Check it out.
Very cool game. Taylor?
Hi, I'm Taylor Navarro. You can find me at Taylor Ann NX. That's TaylorAnnNNNX. If you're worried, just throw an extra N in there. And something that I would like to plug is my January project, Chef's the Party, of which I had the wonderful Nala make a one-page design the one-page game. It's a restaurant menu. It's a cooking mini game for your ongoing RPG campaign. And that was like my first time like properly leading my own independent project, and I think it deserves more love because you should be cooking with your adventuring party.
Absolutely. Food is so important, and all the food that's on there is so good. And I've been Nala J. Wu. My pronouns are they, them. I am at Nala Wu on Twitter and at Nala Draws everywhere else. That includes Instagram, Blue Sky, TikTok, etc. I draw things, and I art direct things, and I do layout and graphic design. I am that weird artist that can do both. I am the unicorn of artists in this space. So I'd love to work with y'all. Slide into my email, naladraws@gmail.com. My one project project I'd love to plug is that tonight, the 3rd episode of Last of Eden's Vices comes out. That is a Vampire the Masquerade actual play set in Providence, Rhode Island. I play a sad, wet cat of a vampire who's just doesn't want to be here and is kind of the comic relief of the group, which is a very fun change from the typical kinds of characters that I tend to play. But this has been Stronger Together, a peer collaboration in TTRPGs. Thank you all so much for being here, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the con. And again, we're going to head to the Discord if y'all want to continue this conversation, but be sure to introduce yourself to the peers around you, and good luck in all your future collaborations. Have a good day.